All right, let's start this thing. What's up? I'm Jake. This is a Deep Dive with Jake, where I bring people I think are great, creators, whoever I think are great, and we talk about things. We talk about them specifically. And today I thought it'd be interesting to bring on my beautiful second in command, my co-host to the Jake and Cory podcast, Cory. What's
Hey,
up,
buddy.
Cory? How you doing?
I'm doing very good. I just don't host the Jake and Cory podcast.
Yeah, I know. We'll get to that in a second. Cory
Okay, all right.
is also well known for doing a little show called Fat Guy Radio Show, and he's been doing it for probably 45 years or something like that.
That's
Long
about
time.
right. That's literally about right. 45 years.
And me and Cory, we go way back. Close to 10 years now, almost, if you believe it. And back in the day, I did a video game podcast under his network. That is now defunct, but we don't have to get into that.
The podcast is defunct or the network is defunct? Are you foreshadowing here?
Well, we'll see after this interview if your channel still exists, depending on what you say.
And Lord knows what I will say.
So I had a show on there, and then I actually was a co-host on Fat Guy Radio Show for like a year. But the show goes far beyond me hosting it. I am just a small piece of history in the Fat Guy Radio Show history, but someone who's been there from the beginning, who created it, who's still there because he's the host. I mean, if he wasn't there, it'd be kind of weird. Cory Blaze is here, and I feel like I've introed you to death over here.
Yeah, and that's something that doesn't normally happen, or if it does happen, it's something that I've written. So thank you for the intro. And you're not a small part of the Fat Guy Radio Show.
As far as time frame, I think
no, we've had shorter. We've had shorter. We've had a co-host that didn't even make it out of the observation chair. And he was asked not to come back. But, hey, when you're growing something like Fat Guy Radio Show, you go through those waves. You know what I mean? When you're building something, you have to go through those waves and kind of weed it out. But your timeline may have been small, but your contribution, Jake, to Fat Guy Radio Show was not small. We still harken back when we're going through training and when we're looking at ways to increase the product. We harken back to some of the things that you've done and some of the way that you presented. And you were there during the big Studio G process when we got one of the
Studio G, as I like to call it,
to the show, listener Gail. You were there for that. You started. Yes, Studio G. You were there when that started. So
well, we could jump into that. It feels very weird doing an interview with you because we do a show together every week and we just shoot the breeze. But I never actually like interview you and ask you who you are. And I like to start these things by asking for people who don't know who you are. And if they're on this channel, they probably do know who you are. But if they don't, if they're just clicking through, how would you describe yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Just people that don't know me, my description would be, I'm the guy that says what you're thinking, with no fear of recourse. And that has gotten me into trouble. That has also garnered me a mildly successful internet radio career. I'm the guy that everyone either loves or hates. And then there's this third trifecta that's recent, that people are loving to hate me, which is really cool because Fat Guy Radio Show is different than every other podcast that you hear out there. Number one, I don't classify Fat Guy Radio Show as a podcast, even though it is podcast-esque. I like to classify it as an internet radio show, which separates me a little bit from podcast. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with doing a podcast. I do that too. But I'm the guy that is going to say what you're thinking, the guy that's going to either make you laugh or depress the hell out of you. One or the other is going to happen.
So when did Fat Guy Radio Show start? When was the inception of Fat Guy Radio Show? And what was the thing that made you want to start doing it?
The inception of Fat Guy Radio Show, it actually began in the spring of 2011. I want to say somewhere, right as winter was transitioning into spring, in 2010. And what happened that incited Fat Guy Radio Show and me wanting to get into the internet radio broadcasting thing is Janet Jackson performed at the Super Bowl and exposed a nipple. And that sent a lot of hot talk radio shows into a tailspin because sponsors and everybody got very nervous. A lot of the shows that I listened to, like Big O and Dukes, when they were on 101.5 Free FM here in Phoenix, Arizona, and subsequently the Don and Mike show and Tom Likas and then Adam Carolla, those guys were all through broadcast radio at the time. And then Janet Jackson's boob came out and they all started going away. And what I felt is that Arizona lost every last one of those shows that I just mentioned. And so I saw an opportunity to pick up the mantle for here in Arizona for hot talk radio. And this was at the time before podcasting or internet radio was such a huge thing. So when some of those shows like Big O and Dukes and the Don and Mike show minus Don and just became the Michael Mara show, when they resurfaced online as an internet radio show, I saw that as an opportunity for something that I can do here for my now robbed of hot talk radio state of Arizona. We had no Big O and Dukes. We had no Don and Mike anymore. We had no Tom Likas. All we had was Delilah and her soft talking over some instrumental piano music, and only people that own 5 cats really enjoy that. And it wasn't hot talk. There was nobody out there making you laugh or depressing the hell out of you anymore. So I began studying what Big O and Dukes did, Oscar Santana and Chad Dukes, and studying what Michael Mara did, and going back and listening to a lot of archives of Adam Carolla, Tom Likas, Tom Joyner back in the day, even Steve Harvey's radio show out of Texas, and just listening to what those guys were doing and literally teaching myself that this is something that I can do. I was a camera operator for a local church at the time, and I had this assistant, is the best way to explain it, but he was really a cable runner by the name of Philippius. And he and I were really good friends and became best friends and so forth. And so I started throwing this idea that I wanted to do this internet radio show, but I needed a producer. I needed someone to help with the ones and twos. And Philippius at the time, he just knew how to run cable. And I think he was washing cars at the time as a day job. And he was like, dude, I'm willing to do it. Just show me what to do. And I'm like, well, if I'm showing you what to do, we're both learning at the same time because neither one of us know what the hell to do. So in the winter to spring transition of 2010, we just started doing a lot of research. And then one drunken night right behind me in my living room here, one drunken night in, I want to say February of 2011. That's how much time had transitioned. In February 2011, me and a group of my friends were just hanging out right behind me, being drunkenly stupid. And Philippius, I believe, was actually sitting in this chair that's right behind me, this wicker old chair that was a gift from a friend of mine 20 odd so years ago. And I told him, I said, dude, so we're going to do this radio thing or this podcast thing. What do we call it? And Philippius, with a beer in his hand, I believe it was a Corona, looked at me,
topical,
slovenly drunk, if that's even a word. And he says, well, you want to do a radio show and you're a fat guy. Call it that. And that's literally how the name of the show began. And the table that I'm sitting at right now wasn't the original table, but where I'm sitting doing this with you is actually where Fat Guy Radio Show launched its first episode. But where I taught myself how to do talk radio, how to carry a conversation, how to conduct an interview, how to build a story happened in a hallway just over my shoulder, where I have a powder room across the hallway from my laundry room. And it was in my laundry room that I set up an old microphone. I set up a tall chair. And then I sat in a chair, put the microphone in front of my face, and then I stared across the hallway into the mirror in the bathroom. And I taught myself how to host a show. I mimicked what I heard those Big Owen Dukes, Mike O'Mara, Adam Carolla. I mimicked what they did. And then little by little, I started tuning in my own little splashes to get to, actually recording and releasing the show. And a lot of people don't know this, but the first episode of Fat Guy Radio Show had like this big 5-minute music break in the middle of it, because I didn't know how to fill 45 minutes of time. So we would just
now you do no problem.
yeah. Now you can't shut me up. And so we would put in, and then if it was a show that we really I didn't have much to talk about, we'd always put in Hotel California, because that's going to give us a good 8-minute break. You know what I mean? But the show began out of the elimination of the hot talk genre. And unfortunately, so many years later, that genre has not returned. It has successfully resurfaced online. And that, of course, has spawned a lot of, Joe Rogan and his show. The podcasting industry has just absolutely exploded. But that's what was behind Fat Guy Radio Show beginning.
That's super interesting. I didn't know most of that stuff, so that's super interesting. I didn't know Philippius came up with the name.
Yeah.
God bless his soul. I love that man.
My little Mexican guy, until this day, he came up with it in this very living room behind me. He literally said, you want to do a radio show and you're a fat guy. And that's how the name was born.
Yeah, you literally were ahead of the curve. You were doing something that now it seems like everyone and their grandma has a podcast, but at the time when you started, you said 2010, right?
It was 2010 when I really started digging in and researching and learning and studying how to do what I did. But it was many years after. It was maybe a year or two before that, because I think I'm not sure exactly what year it was that Janet Jackson's boob flopped out from Justin Timberlake pulling it. I'm not sure when that was, but it was around that time.
Yeah, that was a while ago. And at that time, it was hard to do a podcast. There wasn't these amazing things like RSS feeds and the technology we have now is not the same as what we had back then. So trying to figure that out, I commend you for that. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. And, a lot of people will point to, Joe Rogan, Adam Carolla, who else? Tom Green as being the person who introduced them to podcasting. But, for me, you're the guy. You're the guy that introduced me to what a podcast was. I mean, was doing and you don't call it a podcast, You call it a radio show.
I call it an internet radio show podcast.
Yeah, but you were on the cusp of greatness. You were ahead of the curve for sure. Was that something that you were interested in? Like before you started the podcast, had you always been interested in like radio, communication, that kind of stuff? Is that something you were always interested in, or was it something that you were at that time you were just like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll do this?
The answer to your question is I've always been an entertainer. I've always been interested in entertaining. My parents have this old picture of me that I believe I was 2 years old. And I was sitting up on the back end of a couch and I had my leg up and I'm just in a diaper and one of my dad's trucker hats. And I'm just posed up on, the back of the couch. So I was a ham from the beginning. Something that a lot of people don't know is that I'm a middle child. I'm stuck between two girls, growing up. It was later in life that we got my little brother, DJ Little D, but I was a middle child growing up and I was stuck between two girls. And the older sibling, everybody knows how that goes. I had a bad case of middle child syndrome. So as I grew up, my older sister, she has multiple master's degrees on the wall. My younger sister has multiple degrees on the wall, works in corporate America, and my mother works in corporate America. My older sister is damn near an attorney. And I'm the only one that put on the red nose and the big floppy shoes and became an entertainer. And it was literally from birth. I remember days of taking lamps and bed sheets and setting them up in my living room and putting on a show. And I would do a show even if none of my family was watching. In the house that I grew up in as a child, we had this big, huge bay window. And if my family wasn't willing to watch me, I'd draw the curtains and sit there and dance or perform or do characters or skits that I saw on Gilligan's Island, and I do it for whoever was walking by because I just wanted an audience. I just wanted attention. I was attention deprived as a kid. So when I got into school, I remember the first play I ever did was a small cut down rendition of the musical, The Jungle Book. And I was in the 4th grade at Holdeman Elementary School in Tempe, Arizona. And I remember studying for this part. I remember learning to sing The Bare Necessities, which was my big, huge number in the play. Our stage was made up of, paper cutout trees and stuff like that. And we ended up actually performing it in a conference room at a hotel that was near the school. So that was 4th grade. And so I've always been into entertainment. As I got older, I started to study music. I became a musician. I started touring with a gospel group. I was playing in churches on a weekly basis. It was so weird. There was a point in time in my life where I would be in a club singing and gyrating, have all this sexy up there moving. And then on Sunday morning, singing for Baby Jeebus. You know what I mean? So the music industry got me to that point, and then I got bit by the business bug, and I opened up my first business when I was 17 years old. And so it kind of like everything along my life just accumulated to this, from acting to music theater to directing music, and then that led into video production, and then video production led into graphic design led into video editing led into this. So everything along my life was always geared towards some level of entertainment. So I look at internet radio show hosting as just another pleat in the cape of entertainment that I feel I've always worn my entire life.
Yeah, you're very much a Donald Glover. Donald Glover, he's known for like being an actor, a comedian, a singer. Because not only do you do all that stuff, you're also a phenomenal singer and musician. So don't count yourself out there either, my friend.
Old ways. Now all of those skills are utilized for,
The
entertainment
show.
skits on the show. You know what I mean? If someone called me up right now to be a wedding singer, I wouldn't know the first thing to do. I wouldn't have, and I do still get requests to come out and sing at weddings, but now I don't sing at weddings. I actually officiate them, which is really cool.
Well, I've got a business proposition for you.
Again?
So my friend's getting married next week.
Oh no! Oh, not next week. Yeah, I'm still COVIDed in the house here. That front door over my shoulder hasn't opened in 6 months.
Well, that's an interesting transition there, actually. How has your show? How has been the transition from, because you guys, the whole thing with Fat Guy Radio Show and why Fat Guy Radio Show is so great, in my opinion, is the rapport you have with, back in the day, you had a rapport with Philippius and, different co-hosts. Me and you had that moment together. And now, you have the rapport with the boys that are on there now. And, like D-Tay, Lil D. But how has that transition of being face to face, and because I know that you guys aren't doing the show in person anymore, and has that affected how you do the show, how the show feels? Is it a strange transition for you?
Yeah, you're right. The rapport that I have with my executive producer Daniel Taylor, my co-host Doug the DA Andrew, and I don't know what my little brother's title will be. I like to just call him a little ankle biter. But yeah, the rapport and feeling the energy of being in one studio was something that we really relied on. So when COVID hit, it sent a ripple, throughout the entire globe. And of course, Fat Guy Radio Show was affected by that. The transition to everyone being at home, I get the distinct pleasure of still having to go to Studio G to be able to power up the hub of the center for everybody to connect into from home. So I still have to transition and still make that move, which is literally the only time I leave my house during the week is to go there. And, I put on my hazmat suit and I get the Secret Service to escort me to the studio. But it's, the transition has been challenging. I'm just to pull the curtain back, it literally has been challenging.
Yeah.
Especially for me, because not only the fact that we're not in the same room together, it's the time before the show, it's the time after the show, it's the prepping, the ideas bouncing around, the just the brotherhood of us hanging out. Because before Fat Guy Radio Show, which isn't seen, before we go live, the guys are in studio an hour and a half to sometimes 2 hours beforehand, just shooting the S and hanging out. And that's the time that we're building that rapport. That's the time that we're communicating. We're just having that time of fellowship, if you will. And that connection bleeds over onto the microphones when it comes to the show, like to the point where I know what makes D-Tay tick. D-Tay knows what makes Doug tick. Doug knows what sends little D on a little tangent. And we know that about each other. And that's not because we sat down one day and said, this is what ticks us. It's because of the time that we spent together before and after the shows and on outings and stuff like that, that we just really learned about each other. Like, it's the same thing that you and I did when you were a part of the show. You took my Five Guys virginity. You know what I mean? I've never eaten peanuts out of a barrel before. So it's those times that COVID took away. It's that connection, and we still have it to a certain degree. But when you're talking through, like a webcam, like we are right now, it's hard to read someone because you see them from the chest up, or you see them from the neck up, or in the case of my little brother, you only see half of his face because him and camera angles just don't get along. But COVID took that away from us. We thank God for the technology that's available to us, and we've definitely had to pivot and change up and adjust very quickly. I think that we were only down 1 week after we had to shut down in-person operations. But it has affected the show, but internally. But I believe the external presentation of the show, um, I don't believe has gone unchanged. We're still the guys, just like when we were working together on the show. Daniel Taylor, Doug Andrew, and Little D. Those guys they're wackadoos on the air, but man, when those microphones are off and our live stream is down, those guys are the most highly professional individuals that I've ever worked with. They are just so innovative. They're so creative. They're so adjustable and sporadic, to come up with the ways and ideas and innovations to keep the show at its level when we were in studio, and to come up with ways to elevate it to the next level. So I believe now that we're 3 months into this, separation production, the guys have really dug deep and they've elevated the energy for what we had when we were in studio. But I can't take the credit for the full successful transition. I really have to give it to the team. We bust each other's balls on the air. We punch each other in the face. That's what we do. We get into serious, real fights on the air. But when it comes down to the responsibility of making sure that we get a show out, given the COVID circumstances, those guys are superstars. They really are superstars. And I honestly would not, just like when you were on the show, without all of them, without this team, I don't think Fat Guy Radio Show would have a fighting chance.
Yeah, I've actually enjoyed watching your guys' transition from studio to now digitally, like we're doing right now.
It's so weird because I literally sit in the studio, and the studio was built for. It's very small, but the studio is designed for maybe 7 people max in that room comfortably. We fit more, but it was very uncomfortable. So you've got like this big round table, and now all of the technology, all of the screens. I have a screen that's up on the wall. I have a screen that's right in front of me. I have a little monitor over under the screen on the wall. Then I got the main computer that's recording and capturing everything that's running. And then I've got break iPad, then I've got sound effects iPad, then I've got our main recording dashboard in front of me, on top of having my own laptop in front of me for notes and navigation. So I've become an octopus of, trying to, do everything at one time, because, I literally have taken on 3 other people's jobs on the one when it comes to the production aspect of the show. So it's wild. It's wild, but the presentation is seamless. And that is really in part because of, how flexible and innovative the guys and the team have been.
Well, because that's something I noticed about your show early on, was that you were doing a video podcast, which you have the audio version as well, which people can go out and find. I'll leave links in the description, of course. But you guys were doing video podcasts well before anyone I knew was doing a video podcast, and the technological difficulties of that have shown to be difficult in modern times with COVID and doing everything in other rooms. Our show was easy. I'd say, relatively easy. Obviously, I'd like to do the show in the same room with you, but our show was easy because we were able to just hit record and it doesn't matter. The video aspect of it doesn't matter. Also, the fact that there's only two of us, the fact that Fat Guy Radio Show has what is it? 4 people? Like
four active mics. It's a four mic format.
Yeah. So the fact that you guys have 4 mics and you guys have made it work for 10 years now it's impressive, man.
4 mics, 4 cameras, 4 headphones, 8 balls.
Well,
yeah. Well,
7.5, but
7.5. Lil D, he had an accident in '84 with a pellet gun, and unfortunately, we're not sure, but that ain't stopped him from having 1,500 kids.
I've always felt like, and not to suck your dick, but but if you'd allow me for just a moment.
This is the one self-gratifying interview anyway, so it's good. It's cool.
Back when I was on the show, and I was on the show back in, I think it was like 2013, 2014, something like that.
Yeah.
It was right around the time I started going to school for audio engineering, which since I have completed. But I have always felt like doing Fat Guy Radio Show was a boot camp. It was a school on how to both, because at the time, not on Fat Guy, but on the other show I was doing, I was running the soundboard, which you helped me so much on learning how to run a soundboard, how to record, how to get external recordings, how to back up, how to run a podcast. And then also on top of that, just how to be a personality and how not to be stupid on the air. So I always looked at it as a boot camp, and I've always felt like you guys have brought people in. You guys being you have brought people in with open arms and said, hey, you want to start a show. You don't have a lot of experience doing a show. Let me teach you. You're kind of like the mama bird saying, come here, baby birds. I will teach you. I will show you the way. And you have created some great personalities out of it. DT used to have a show on there with you guys, and he's one of my favorite personalities. I love him to death, that guy. So I just think it's wonderful that you are willing to just be an open person, and what you see on the show is not an act. Like,
no, that's me.
You guys are genuinely just those people, which makes the show even more entertaining to watch.
You speak on that, and the reason why I'm like that, Jake, is because not to get sappy or anything, but
please do. I'd love it if you did.
A lot of my life growing up.
If you cry, this interview will be next level.
I have been known to cry, but a lot of my life, Jake, being heavy, being black, not fitting into, growing up in South Phoenix and not fitting into the mold of South Phoenix, by the way that I talk, by the way that I present myself, by the fact that I don't say axe and I say ask. There were a lot of times where I never got the opportunity to do things that I wanted to do. So I learned to create opportunities for things for myself. And I always told myself, if I'm ever in a position, or if I ever get to a position where I can regurgitate, if you will, the learnings that I have into someone else, I'm going to do that. Because I feel that it's not about me just lifting myself up and elevating my knowledge base. I believe that your success is pinned on your ability to make someone else successful. or your ability to share your knowledge with someone else with no expectation of return, with no return on your investment, but just to pour that in. So when you were part of the show, and everyone is part of the show, everyone got the opportunity to know and learn what Cory has figured out. And I do the same thing. I take the teacher hat off and put on the student hat at time to learn from people that are around me. And when I was starting, in particular, starting Fat Guy Radio Show, I reached out to people that I looked up to. People in radio, people in broadcast, people in video. And you will be surprised how 9 out of 10 of them shut their door to me out of fear that I was wanting to learn what they knew in an attempt to replace them or to take what they have, which was never the case. So because I experienced that, I told myself, I'm not going to be one of those guys. I'm not going to be one of those insecure radio people. I'm going to change the mold of that, because over the years, I learned that there is a lot of insecurity and there's a lot of fear when it comes to on-air personalities because of the way that the industry was. It was a cutthroat industry. If you took a vacation, you could return to a pink slip. You know what I mean? You were looking for interns that were lower on the knowledge base because you never wanted to bring someone in that could potentially become smarter than you. That was the industry of radio, and I learned that just by reading books, studying up on some of these large radio personalities that I looked up to. And when I reached out to those guys, when I started Fat Guy Radio Show, a lot of them told me to kick rocks. A lot of them said, F off, bro. I don't want anything to do with you. If you're going to do this, figure it out on your own. I didn't want to be one of those guys. I didn't want to shut the door. I wanted to share everything that I learned through trial and error. When I broke something, when I hit my head, when I fell into a hole in learning how to do this, I told myself that I'm going to show everyone else that's willing to listen how to navigate around the holes that I fell into. So when you say that it's like a boot camp, that's by design. I share everything with DT. I share everything with Doug. I share not everything with my little brother because he really doesn't care much. But for those that do want, I poured that into them. I did it when you were around because I never wanted to be one of those guys that shut the door on me when I was trying to figure stuff out. Now, I'm not saying that to say, oh, Cory was in the fight. You know, Cory had to build and rip everything for his own. No, I don't want to continue that culture of radio where you're not allowed to learn from people that are already where you want to be. So that's why it's such I'm an open book. Everything that I know, and when you were around and you were learning audio and patching and backing up and video and stuff, dude, you didn't realize how much of that time was us actually learning together. You would have a suggestion or an idea. We take a piece of that, add it to the piece of what I have, and then we have something beautiful in the, you know what I mean? So there was always a
I think I lost you. Cory? Uh-oh. I lost Cory. You know, this is... I lost you for a few seconds there.
I lost you too, and I was riffing real good, so I don't know where I left off, but I apologize for that.
I can tell you where you left off. But you know, this is the beauty of
of remote interviews. It's ridiculous.
Which shows post-COVID. Yeah, I mean, you were saying, you know, a lot of that time that we spent together, you were also we were learning together, and
yeah, people closed the door on me. I didn't want to be one of those guys that, you know, C-blocked someone else from learning. Even now that you and I aren't working, you and I aren't we have the Jake and Cory podcast, but you've gone on and taken some of the knowledge that you learned while doing Fat Guy Radio Show and built something of your own.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge you for that. I don't begrudge anybody for going out there and doing something that they learned. That if you succeed, I succeed. And I take that as a badge of honor. That's not the culture of radio. That's not the culture of broadcast at all. It's, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to keep mine. I'm going to play everything close to the vest. I'm not going to invest in someone else's knowledge.
So you mentioned a little bit already some of your influences as far as radio goes. I'd like you to, if you'd like, not forcing you, but I'd like you to maybe expand a bit on some of your influences as far as radio goes, as far as podcasting goes, and also just as far as you as a human, some of your influences.
Some of my influences, as far as like when it comes to my form of comedy, it goes back to it's a very eclectic group of people. Bernie Mac was a huge influence of mine. Eddie Murphy, huge influence. Roseanne Barr, huge influence. Prior to, this one's even more touchy. Prior to the arrest and conviction, Bill Cosby. I was often called the Cosby Kid when I was in school because, I wore sweater vest. I was a kid.
You lived in Arizona. What are you doing?
It got cold 2 or 3 days a year.
That's true.
But Bill Cosby was an inspiration behind some of my comedy. Also, Carrot Top, the comedian. His just zany, quick fire. You know what I mean? Just his ability to just come off the top of his head with something. Bertie Mac's ability to literally just find someone in the audience and just rip them. You know what I mean? That's something that, I still do to this day. If DT or Doug or my little brother gives me an inch, I'm taking a mile with piling on and ripping them a new one. So those are some of the comedians that have inspired me. Radio-wise, podcast-wise, the first ever radio show that I remember hearing was an old gospel show called the Bill Larkins Gospel Hour, the Larkins Gospel Hour, and it aired on 1280 AM here in Phoenix, Arizona, and it sounded like crap. It sounded like someone had threw a down sheet blanket that's 3 inches thick over a record player. That's how bad it sounded.
It's like public access stuff. Yeah.
It literally was public access, but that was brother Fred Larkins.
Okay.
And he was actually a close family friend, but that was the first radio show that I remember hearing. And on Sunday evenings as a child, I remember my father going into the living room, opening up half of the floor model console TV unit we had. One half was storage, then the TV was in the middle, and then the other half was a record player. And he opened up the record player or opened up the radio or the record player side where there was a radio dial in there. He tuned it in to 1280, and we listened to Fred Larkins. And Fred Larkins pictured and talked like this. Welcome to the Fred Larkins Gospel Hour, coming to your homes everywhere in South Phoenix. Join First Methodist Baptist Pentecostal Church this Sunday as they having a youth jamboree. That's how Fred Larkins was, and that was the first radio show I remember ever hearing. And I would only run into the living room and listen to the show when he was talking. When he played music, I went and did something else, play with Legos or Matchbox cars or try to stretch that, stretchy toy that we had back in the day. That's how old I am. but
dating yourself.
yeah, I know. He was the first. As I got older, Big O and Dukes, Adam Carolla, there were broadcast people. What I admired so much about Big O and Dukes, which is hosted by um, Oscar Santana and Chad Dukes, is their ability to create characters of people around them. Their producer, Drab T-Shirt, Matt Cahill is his real name, but Drab T-Shirt, their producer, he became a character on the show. And so their ability to spotlight someone else that was a no-name, if you will, is what made their show so different from everybody else's. You listened to it for what Big O and Dukes were going to develop a character or develop a personality or present to you a personality on their show. And I loved how they did that. And that was one thing that I took from them. The Don and Mike show was not very big in Phoenix, but it was piped in from Washington, D.C. and was simulcast in Tucson, and you got a little bit of the Don and Mike show. And what I liked about that was just the edginess of their show, how they pushed the envelope. I studied them because they pushed the envelope, but the envelope never went over the edge. But they definitely did it. Now, Tom Likas, he had no envelope. He blew everything up he touched. And I loved it. He got into so much trouble. He wasn't edgy. He was sharp. Anything he came through, he cut up. And I love that about it. And so I took a little bit from all of those inspirations to kind of build the Cory Blaze that you see before you today. So all those people really played a major role in inspiration. Oscar Santana, more so recently, where I was blessed with the opportunity to meet him in person, sit down and have lunch with him. Back in 2018, when I traveled to Washington, D.C., where he was to be on the Tony Perkins show, and Tony Perkins, the host of that show, opened up the door for me to have this amazing mind conversation with Oscar, just one-on-one in person, and his business mind and his sense of the industry of radio is just absolutely phenomenal, and something that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to do, to have a one-on-one conversation with Oscar Santana, who is now the backbone of one of the most successful podcasts out there, the Michael Mara Show. On top of that, being the part business owner of a growing and expanding podcast network in Washington, D.C., called Podcast Village. So that was prior to all of that happening. I had the opportunity to sit with Oscar, but he in particular has been, a huge confidant, guy that I can reach out to and, bounce ideas off of. And he kind of just befriended me in the business of podcast and radio. And he'll listen to a couple episodes and send me a text message and say, "Hey, bro, I probably want to avoid doing that again." You know what I mean? Certain things that we do on the show. But those are some of my inspirations, man, and what I've taken from every last one of those guys, and a little bit from everyone, and developed. And I'm still developing, and I'm still learning what to do and what not to do, and how to make the show better, how to get the show to a greater reach, how to, monetize the show more. And we've honestly have been tremendously blessed or lucky, or however you want to look at it, from the monetization aspect as well for Fat Guy Radio Show. And BDB Radio Network has been an absolute godsend for allowing us to go under a platform, because it's just in the presentation of you being associated with a network is better received, because you come under this, this covering of a network. So it's been an interesting ride, and pulling from all of those inspirations.
So I have a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. But we've talked a lot about Fat Guy Radio Show and the BDB Radio Network, which we haven't mentioned much. Actually, BDB Radio Network is kind of it's your business, right? I mean, and you've had a few shows underneath the BDB Radio Network. One of which I was part of back in the day. You used to have a sports show. Yeah. Do you have any plans to expand more with the BDB Radio Network?
Well,
as far as more
like
shows, or are you focusing more on Fat Guy right now? Or
well, I don't like to classify BDB Radio Network as mine because it's definitely not mine. I'm an operating partner of it. A lot of the decision making that happens is, geared towards, growing the network and so forth like that. I don't want to come across like I'm pleading the fifth.
Okay.
But right
That's
now, we are in such...
It's a weird time, yeah.
COVID crisis navigation right now. Our future was laid out. Our path was laid out. And we have since...
and then a bulldozer came and destroyed that path.
We've since hit roadblocks. I am very optimistic about the future growth of BDB Radio Network. What that optimism is for, I couldn't tell you. But
it's always good to be optimistic.
I'm going to remain optimistic, not to, be a downer, but BDB Radio,
reality, yeah.
It literally is. And anyone that's part of a network that's like this, when you're hit with when COVID hit, man, we were at an up trajectory, business wise and plans. And I'll say that it's been extremely challenging. It's been extremely challenging to be able to see where we can go. The good thing is that we were considered an essential business. We can still operate, but because we're media, but it's been very challenging. It's been very difficult, man. I'm not going to lie to you. It's been very, very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that on my end. I have my own network, obviously, the Lonercast stuff, and I decided to pick you to be more of a personality. Which you're a personality on Fat Guy, but you're also the creator, you're the producer. You kind of do a lot of stuff for PDB Radio Network. So
there's nothing better than going and doing the Jake and Cory podcast and having nothing to do but talk and entertain. Yeah. I love that.
And that was the idea. And that is why I was like, I need Cory, because I was on your show for a bit, and I saw you run around with like a chicken with your head cut off, sort of like try to get the stories together and trying to get it all formatted correctly, all the Google stuff and recording and the backups and posted and and the websites and video hosting and
which I don't complain about.
Right.
I don't complain about it, but it definitely was. There were lots of hats. I think that's why a guy gave me such a cartoon-sized head.
Yeah, and I asked you to come over, and I was like, "Hey, I'd like you to just wear this one hat, and I'd like you to just come over here, just talk to me for about an hour and a half." I mean, we've had one show where it went for like 2.5 hours, but we don't need to talk about
that. I was not responsible for that, but we are so two different people, man. We could not. I mean, we look identical.
We're both wearing hats,
but we are so two different people, and that's what makes the Jake and Cory show so unique, because you don't have two guys that are just sitting there and circle jerking, each other's thoughts and feelings, where we actually have dynamic contrast on that show. Dynamic contrast because our personalities are different, our thoughts are different, our expressions are different. We understand each other. We respect each other's difference of opinion or difference of thought. But we couldn't be cut from two different cloths if someone tried, But that's what makes the show so amazing, and that's one of the reasons why I'm attracted to doing the show with you.
Yeah, and I remember some of the conversations we had back in the day on Fat Guy, and that it was just like the most fun times. And I was like, man, I want to relive that. I want to have Cory do that, and I want to do that for an hour every week. And I want people to listen to it. And honestly, like the people listening to it is like second to me, because I just like having the conversations with you. So if people listen, that's just icing on the cake.
And see, that's an immediate difference right there. You focus on the conversation we're having. In my mind, I'm focusing on the numbers and the listeners and the business aspect.
Who's going to care about this conversation? Yeah.
and Jake's just like, man, I'm just having fun, dude. This is amazing. I just want to sit here and chill and hang out with you and record it. And I'm like, well, Jake, we might want to have some fans and some interactions and stuff like. But that's just where our worlds are different. We're yin and yang, just facing opposite directions.
Yeah, I love doing it, but and I kind of started this whole thing, and we started our show together right before COVID hit, like literally like 3 weeks before we started doing it.
Now be honest, Jake. The Jake and Cory podcast was an idea a year and a half before it ever became to fruition.
That's very true. We've been and even longer. I mean, we've been talking about doing something for like years, and it just finally decided to happen right before COVID hit. And it hasn't necessarily been easy. It's a lot more fun,
and it hasn't been easy for a lot of people.
Oh, I mean,
not just us, but a lot of people, as I blow out the iris on my camera.
I mean, this is all petty shit in comparison to, the actual ramifications of COVID. But, as far as the show goes, it's been rough, but I've enjoyed having an outlet and someone like you to talk about these things, because that's kind of the what our show is all about, is just talking about what's going on in the world and what's going on in our lives and what we think is important. I mean, we'll touch on hot topics, but I'd say that's not even really what the show is about. But
it's definitely an outlet of expression, and it's a different lane for me when it comes to expression. Like, you have multiple shows that you do as well, and you have different lanes to allow you to express yourself. Like, you want to express video gaming, you have a lane to express video gaming, and you have a lane to express certain things with the Jake and Cory podcast, and I have the Jake and Cory podcast to express, and the Fat Guy Radio Show is a little bit different. The expression that I get with Jake and Cory podcast is that I'm not in the driver's seat. We're like on one of those tandem bicycles. Even though I try to turn my steering wheel, the bike doesn't go that way.
Yeah, we both need to lean in the direction to make it work.
And that's what makes that show such different. And when people think, why do you have, I've been asked, does your side jobs, because I have the Jake and Cory podcast, I have my B2B radio network affiliation, I have my own blog, After the Levels, and then I have CoryBlaze.com, and then videography work for the Phoenix Suns and Grand Canyon University, and they're like, well, do you do those other different things that just to create competition? And no, they are just different lanes of expression. I put certain expressions down those specific lanes. And that's the difference that's why Fat Guy Radio Show is not a competition of the Jake and Cory podcast. They're different lanes. They're different expressions. And there's nothing wrong. No one likes a 1-lane highway. It's better when you got 6 lanes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we get to just drive right next to each other. It's great.
Yeah, and just swerve all over the place and run into walls.
Well, before we wrap up, we've been going for a while now. Just want to say your framing is beautiful.
Thank you very much.
The lighting is great.
I let the production team come in an hour before I sat down to do. No, I'm kidding.
It's also, I just want to point out how weird it is to do a video show with you, because normally we just do audio.
Yeah, and I don't have a microphone in front of my face. I don't have headphones on. People are probably looking at this and saying, "Oh my God, Cory has ears." Yeah, I got ears. I have ears.
So if people wanted to find you on the old interwebs, where could they find you?
Fat Guy Radio Show. All one word. You Google that, you Yahoo it, you MSN it, all over the place. We are there. Every popular podcast platform you can think of: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, all of the ones, even small apps. We're all, our RSS feed is absolutely everywhere. You Google Fat Guy Radio Show, man. There's no way you can't trip over us. We pride ourselves on being brand fluid, meaning that you're not going to get a Fat Guy Radio Facebook page that looks different from a Fat Guy Radio Show Twitter page. It's brand fluid all over the place, across all platforms. If it looks one way in one place, it's going to look that way everywhere else. So Fat Guy Radio Show, you Google that, you put that into any search engine, you will definitely find us. And then it will lead you into the cornucopia of Fat Guy Radio Show, into what, it'll lead you to the Jake and Cory podcast. It'll lead you to After the Levels, the blog. It'll lead you to, our Facebook page or Twitter account. All of that is all there. So I hate when people do interviews and they start rambling off. Facebook.com/FatGuyRadioShow _44666, Twitter.com/FatGuyRadioShow/FF4. Be brand fluid. It's Fat Guy Radio Show. And if it don't say Fat Guy Radio Show, guess what? It ain't me.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Cory. It was fun. It was weird.
Why was it weird? How was it weird?
It's just weird interviewing your friend, Well,
Jake,
you don't feel that?
Maybe I've interviewed several of my friends.
Well, I don't have any friends. You're my only friend, so.
Oh, virtual hug.
Oh,
virtual.
That's a good place to end it. Check out the Jake and Cory show every Monday.
And Fat Guy Radio Show every Thursday.
Fat Guy Radio Show every Thursday. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And just to, promote myself a little bit, check out the Loner Gamecast. I don't know when I'm going to post this, but Monday, Tuesday, Jake and Cory. Tuesday, Loner Gamecast. Thursday, Fat Guy Radio Show, but it's on a different channel, so go find it. Not to confuse you, but anyway, bye-bye.
Yeah, way to sell it, Jake.